Mr. Andy Flattery, thank you so much for joining me today, being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters.
Hey, Brandon. It's great to see you. Thank you for having me on. And when do I get my baseball card?
Yes, we have an Excel sheet. Not everyone's on the sheet, but yes, we have a big Excel sheet, and I know your name is in there. I can confirm that, but I can't, what I tell people whose name is in there, I can't tell you when it's going to happen, because actually I don't even control that. It's part of it. So that's something you have to yell at Aladdin about, of when the things actually happen, when things are actually come out as cards. So yes, no, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you again and I always joke with everybody, for anyone who doesn't know, being a non-playable character is someone who cannot think or cannot critically think, which is, the remnants of 100+ years of government total schooling, compulsory schooling. So thank you for bucking that trend.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Okay. So we were talking offline a little bit about, religion and Bitcoin and Catholicism and Bitcoin specifically. Obviously, you and I being both Catholics, and talking about the many Catholics that there are in Bitcoin actually, and how these things, they go together so well. And some of the things that we've been thinking about for so many years, and Bitcoin really threads the needle on a lot of those things, or checks a lot of those check boxes. So I'd love for you to just give a little bit of your background, I guess, but also, the Bitcoin story, but also how that has jived with your Catholic faith and intertwined those two worlds.
Great. Yeah. There's a lot going on there. On the one hand, they're sort of not related. But I am professionally a financial advisor. So I own an investment firm, and I've been doing that now for a career of over a decade. And so one of the questions that I am most often asked and most often giving advice on is, where should I put my money? Like, imagine that. That's what financial advisors tend to talk about more often than not. And because I am sort of vocally Catholic and involved in the church, informally, I'm not like officially involved in the church in any way. A lot of Catholics will ask me that question, like, where should I put my money? And this is something I've wrestled with for a long time. The sort of token approach, first off, the conventional answer is really a non-answer. There's really not a lot of great advice given amongst Catholics on this very question.
Yes.
There's been a couple like letters that the USCCB has written about investing that, to be totally honest, are super helpful. And out of those letters, there are like financial products that people could buy. And I'm telling you right now, most of them are probably not worth purchasing. Like they're just not super, like they're not super based. You and I, Brandon, like base priest. We were just talking about that.
Yeah.
For example, it'll be like, hey, basically you own the S&P 500, except maybe the 10 worst companies, like the publicly traded strip club and the largest manufacturer of abortifacients or something like that. We'll put you in the S&P, but it's going to be like 490 stocks as opposed to 500 or whatever the case may be. And that's just not super riveting to me. Like, it's just not super inspiring. I don't want to wax poetic on the morality of that, because that's like not my place to do that. But as a matter of like, inspiring me to invest as a righteous man, like that's just not super inspiring. And not to mention I'm a little bit of like a skeptic on just like indexing in general. I think it's like nihilistic investing is what I have called it. Okay. So there's that. The other side to it is the question that Bitcoiners bring up of like, well, why should we have to invest in general? And so when you're talking about like investing, usually the presupposition is like, great, well, what stock should I invest in? And I'm still a stock picker, by the way. So like we have a concentrated portfolio at my firm of like 15 to 20 stocks where we're doing like bottom up stock picking. But it does still bring into question, like, why should we have to do that in the first place? There have been times throughout history where people could just save their money, and we were more of savers than, this idea now where it's like democratize investing and everyone should invest, and that's actually a virtue, right? And so that is one of the ways that I came around to Bitcoin. There's a couple of ways that I came around to it, but one of the ways that I came around to is like, oh, like maybe the answer to my Catholic brethren and myself, because I am too, is like, don't buy dimensional funds, buy Bitcoin. And what you're doing there is you're not only excluding companies that are engaged in sin, but you're literally just getting back to the act of saving. Put very simply. So there's a lot to my Bitcoin story, but as it pertains to the Catholic faith, as it pertains to what I do professionally, that's largely how I came around.
That's fascinating, man. There's so many angles that we could go with that. It makes me think of just the Dave Ramsey stuff, you know? So like I'm a student of Kiyosaki, and I was not a Dave Ramsey fan. However, I've listened to a lot of Dave Ramsey, especially over the last like 5, 6, 7 years. So like I got into Kiyosaki like 15 years ago when I was leaving school. And I think I've read every book, listened to 1,000 hours of Kiyosaki. So like, you know, people like, this and that. And like, I know the nuance of Kiyosaki to like a really deep level. Dave Ramsey, though, I look at him and I respect him. I just not for me necessarily, but I think he has some good things for vast majority of people and just managing their own finances and trying to do basic stuff. And that's what he's speaking to. However, the thing I think of is the job he has done within the Christian community of his Financial Peace University. All his stuff is everywhere, all across that Christian world, I guess, and a lot of Christian churches. So it just makes me like, I feel like Catholics have a harder time though with it than a lot of just, you know, different Christians, I guess. What has been your experience, I guess, with that, and just seemingly harder to kind of penetrate the Catholic Church than other Christian denominations, or what has been your experience in that regard?
Well, I think my experience is a little clouded because since I work with people and their money, I tend to attract people that already are good with their money. If you're not good with money, you're probably not seeking out the help of a financial advisor that you want to pay a healthy fee to. And so, you know, financial advisors like me that charge a high fee, we tend to attract people that already are somewhat good with money. And so my impression of like wealthy Catholics is quite good. Like a lot of them are quite generous. A lot of them, although it's not preached often from the pulpit, like tithe 10% of their income, of their gross income. And that's awesome. It's so impressive for me to see this amongst wealthy Catholics. You know, I just tweeted something this morning about generational wealth. There's a lot of skepticism about generational wealth. I think probably a lot of that comes from the fact that we don't have a lot of examples of great families that have generational wealth. And I see that but I do see great families that are examples of legacy wealth that are doing a great job. Maybe they're not billionaires, but they still are wealthy, you know, in the standards that, you know, most of us are from in here in middle America. So yeah, I mean, Dave, like I think in general, Dave Ramsey has more cultural cachet than, you know, any sort of Catholic who is like, they literally do Financial Peace University at my parish. So I think he is still the standard in that regard. And I don't know, at times I've done the thing where I've tried to pick apart Dave Ramsey. I'm over that. That's like passe now. Like, I don't want to talk about Dave. Like, he does a nice job for what he is. And I'm kind of a student, Brandon, of Joshua Sheets. If you know him, he is the person who exposed me to Robert Kiyosaki. So I know about Kiyosaki through Joshua Sheets, who is the radical personal finance guy. But you know, everyone starts with Dave Ramsey, or a lot of people do, and then they move on to other things, and that's totally fine. He's kind of a gateway drug.
Yeah, 100%. Well said. This is because it's for different types of people, like you said. I mean, I think Dave Ramsey's a great starter person, and that's why that audience is the biggest for sure. So I think he is good to start with, and then we'll go from there. what kind of a side thing here? Why? I don't know if it's so much with Bitcoin necessarily, but why do we have in Catholicism? How are there so many people that vote progressive? Really Marxist, communist, to be quite honest. And I say that, but I don't think most people even understand what Marxism is or communism is. Pope John Paul II, obviously, there's a great book about with him, him and Reagan when, wow, I can't even think of the name now. Pope and the President, right? I think that was it. Big book, but just talking about, a guy who literally saw firsthand the evils of communism and fascism, literally, and actually grew up in, Poland, having people die all around him, and then became, a pope that really anyone who alive now knows, basically, and just a saint. So why is it that we have such a hard time as Catholics? I'm trying to have you answer this massive question, but I can't square this circle either. Why is this? I don't understand. I I did. I was coming in today hoping Andy had the answer for me so I could sleep well tonight.
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist. Available now.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem is there are so many Catholics. Like it's such a large population that you have everything. And so whatever is reflected in the sort of Western world in general is also reflected in Catholicism. But yeah, I grew up with a lot of progressive, quote unquote, Catholics. Many of them are just no longer practicing the faith, very sadly. And, I mean, look at our Pope. You can see that there's still a wing of progressivism in the church. Often people will say like, well, maybe that's dying out because progressives don't reproduce themselves. Like literally you have to be some sort of traditionalist in some way, shape or form to reproduce yourself. And progressivism doesn't tend to do that. But I mean, if you look at your Pope, if you look at like the Jesuits, there is the progressivism, at least in some extent, is alive and well in the church. And I think if you look at the 20th century, it was like the progressive century. I mean, you had the idea of like clothe the naked, feed the homeless, feed the hungry, which obviously is a biblical principle. It's a moral, it's something we have a moral obligation to do. And a lot of people took that in the 20th century. The progressive century is like, well, let's have the government do that.
Yeah.
Let's have the city government and then the state government. And then let's have the national government do that. And then now maybe we'll just have like the one world government or the NGOs take care of that. And that is a challenge with the church. You don't want to see the church just become another NGO. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, like maybe the tax exempt status of the church, there is a inertia to just make the church another, NGO, 501c3 charity whose job it is to, just do these sort of base things, feed immigrants and things like that, in its place is an important thing, but at the expense of preaching the gospel and converting and saving souls. And there are people that can answer this question much more succinctly and better than I can, Brandon, but we're just two bros in the pew trying to hash it out here. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, boy, these are these questions you've pondered for years, right? I mean, part of it is again, this is somewhat related, somewhat not, but I wanted to ask you too. So I'm going to answer your question for the moment with a question, which is, why do people have such a hard time separating faith and people? Because you just mentioned some of the, the Pope we have now who, a lot of what he says is taken out of context, in which, but people who aren't really practicing or don't know the Catholic faith don't understand that. So a lot of it's taken from the media and taken totally out of context. Now, are there some things that are kind of like, oh, what are you saying here? Yeah, there are. so I think there are issues. Let's just say that. The thing that I have an issue with, I guess, in that is, humans are fallible. At the end of the day, it's, we're all still human. And I think that's the thing I have a hard time with. Like, the faith doesn't change, so people leave the faith, or something happens, or they're disillusioned from a scandal or things like that. And it's like, scandals are everywhere in life. Like, go to your local store, go to your local company, go to your local NGO, there's gonna be scandals everywhere. And just because you have someone saying, hey, I'm trying to hold myself to a higher standard, all of a sudden, again, it's just society wants to, like, okay, well, don't fall from that. It's fascinating. And that's something for my entire life I haven't been able to figure out. But the whole, like you said, going back to why do people vote the way they do, I guess, like you said, I think it's fiat. And it's just this century of progressivism coming from, 150 years of the Karl Marx school, Marxist, communist way, really, and really just infecting people over time. That's the only thing I can think of, but it's fascinating to me that people they go down the river. The thing I can't stand, I guess, is second, fifth, 10th order effects, where people will not put life on a pedestal. And like, if you don't have life, if you're just going to abort it all away, for instance, then none of these other things matter. So like, I'm a person who can't stand putting Band-Aids on bullet holes. Like, that to me is our society to a T, and I cannot stand it. Like, if we're going to abort everyone, or we're going to climate change, fearmonger everyone into like, well, we need less population and this and that, then it doesn't matter. None of these issues matter. Then all they're arguing is moot, because humans won't exist. And that feels like the end goal in many ways. A lot of their writings and things like that, the progressive Marxists. So to that end, it's like, well, we need to get the core issue. We need to take care of the oil spill at the top of the river, instead of trying to sift all the oil out 10 miles down the river. And so for a Catholic, I don't expect every single person to understand that or know that. But as a Catholic, the number one thing should be protecting the most vulnerable in the world. And so when I see them going and voting or whatever it is for people who don't hold that, or they say they're Catholic and then they're like, well, I don't care about this. You can do whatever you want. But these things here, we need to let people in the borders, or blah, blah, blah. That, it just makes no sense. And I don't know if it's brainwashing. I don't know what it is. I don't know. So I don't know if that answers the question necessarily, but this is the struggle I've had, just kind of squaring the circle for 20 years. Yeah. So, yeah, the reason that people the only thing I can think of is that people are voting the way they are because of fiat, because they've been infected by that mind virus for so long. And that's the only thing I can make it make sense with, because at the end of the day, if you're taking the number one priority, which is, again, life, like, if life doesn't exist, then none of these other second, 10th, 100th order effects matter. Like, why are we arguing about people coming over the borders when we're over here aborting 1 million children a year? Like, what does it matter at the end of the day? It's like, all things emanate from the gravest evil, which is murdering your own child, or, whatever it might be, right? Like, if whatever you want to call it, let's call it what it is. Okay, well, everything stems from there and flows down. So how do you expect? Of course, we're going to unarm our children in schools. Of course, we're going to let, coyotes, or we're going to let people traffic people across the borders. Of course, because we murder them in the womb. So like, what like, we don't care about their education at that point. We don't care about the trafficking, what goes on the borders. We don't care because you don't care about the gravest thing. So why would you care about any of these other things? And I think that, to me, is the only way any of this can make sense. And so then I look at a Catholic, someone who knows or is practicing, and I'm like, how are you voting for people who support, not sanctifying life? But yet it's like, well, they're going to give money to the poor. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean they're going to give? None of that. We won't exist. So it doesn't matter. I don't know, that it's like this weird cognitive dissonance that humans have. We all have it. Some just more than others.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about being Catholic is we can talk about sin, and it's a little simplistic to just say like, oh, the fall of Adam and Eve is the beginning of all evil in the world, which is obviously true. But it maybe isn't specific enough.
Right.
And so, the thing that we do amongst the Bitcoin communities, we say, well, it's fiat, everything in fiat world is affected by the money. It's fiat, which is obviously true. But as Catholics, we can also say it's literally sinful, because we have this guy named Nicholas Oresme, who was popularized by Guido Holzman in the book, The Ethics of Money Production. And Oresme, this bishop in the 13th century, said that the sin of inflation, and that's my own language. But it was worse than other sins associated with money. So like money changing, usury. Oresme was saying inflation is worse than that. And that's not, a very popular thing to talk about. Like we don't really talk about sin anymore. Most sin is sort of
Right.
explained away as like psychology or something like, oh, it was an addiction. The bankers, they were just addicted to printing money. We just need to give Jerome Powell some therapy, and he could be mentally corrected. And I don't know if Jerome Powell needs to go to confession. Maybe he does. But at least we could say like the system of fiat is like you hear people call it like what do they call it? A structure of sin or something like that, where literally the system itself is a structure of sin. It's a sinful system. And I think that's language that, we as Catholics can incorporate because we still believe that sin is real.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's, like you said, it's been rationalized away from society. In a secular world, there is just, postmodernism, whatever. I remember there was this viral clip a few years ago of this woman. I don't know if it was the 2016 election or what it was, but she was like, it was like two people in the street arguing, like screaming at each other, or at least the girl was. And he was like, that's, this is logic, or like this 2 + 2 it's just math or whatever. And she's like, this is not about logic. It's about emotions. It's like, man, we brainwashed a few generations of people into believing, this postmodern world of view of just like, I can be God. In essence, that's what it is, right? Like you're trying to build the tower up, and like you're trying to do everything to control life, to live in a bubble, to live for 1,000 years, and to go against all really nature's law. So that's a kind of made me think of that, but also I love that you brought up the commandments, because really, fiat in and of itself, the dollar, in my opinion, breaks like half the commandments. Just the existence of it, using the dollar, breaks like half of them. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet other people's belongings. Like it just, you can go down the list, and it's like people are like, well, is Bitcoin the mark of the beast? And it's like, the dollar is the mark of the beast, but the dollar is the global reserve one world currency. Like we are living through this fiat, mark of the beast world, and it really, like you said, and what we've been talking about, explains the last 100 years, of the dollar being that thing, and then just total world wars, aborting children, just all these different things going on. And it's just like, I think we're gonna look back and think, people are 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we're gonna say, man, this is a modern dark ages. Like, you guys, what were you doing?
Yeah. Another one that comes to mind is thou shalt not bear false witness.
Yes.
If you think about it, it's, sort of like a normie conservative, of course, will grumble about how much they're being taxed, and rightfully so. Like, we're taxed quite a lot. But it's one of those things that, like, you and I are the weirdos that understand how inflation is its own tax. But most people are not even aware of it. They think it's, greedy capitalists or something like that are stealing from them by raising prices, unaware of the fact that it's the money that's being debased. So that's, we're being lied to. We're being bared false witness to. So yeah, that's interesting. I never heard it explicitly said that way, where it's like half the commandments are being broken with regards to fiat. That's interesting.
Yeah, I was just looking, and this is, my fault. I don't have them on me right now. I've got the Communist Manifesto sitting over here, but I don't have the, I always half the interviews I pull this out and just be like, hey, know thy enemy, keep it close to you. And so I just pulled up this, Wikipedia, the very first thing that came up. But again, like, I'm the Lord thy God, first commandment, second commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Like, you're breaking commandments right there. Like, you're idolizing money, you're stealing from people. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. It's just like, you can go down the list, and it's just like, what are we doing here? What is going on? And you start seeing all the writing on the wall, because you're not holding true. And I talked to a priest the other day. You're not holding true to nature's law, in essence. I talked to a priest, it was a couple weeks ago. It was my wife and I spiritual director, actually. And he was just saying, he was like, the Bible is it's a book of principles basically wrapped in stories. Like in his macro point was, we don't know necessarily what's true and what wasn't. We have a pretty good idea of what's true, or like what actually happened, what didn't happen, but it's really a book of principles wrapped in parables, wrapped in stories, so we can understand what's going on. That's a lot of what Jesus talked about, obviously. Like, it was in parables, it was these stories so that humans could understand them. And that's when you get away from that. Like, people get into this absoluteness, I feel like, where it's like, well, look, I did it this way and it worked. And it was like, yeah, I mean, there are exceptions to the rules, but God's laying out like, hey, this is the way I want you to. This is the easiest way to do things. Have a man, have a woman come together, have a family. Like, this is the easiest way. And once you start going away, the further you get away from the truth, the harder you make your life, like the harder it is going to be to do anything. And so people like tend to like, I'm going to be my own God, I'm going to make my own way. And then they find it's harder and harder the way, the further they get away from the core, the center. I don't know. It's just wild. Absolutely wild.
I think in general, like, we don't really speak in these sort of moral terms anymore. I think a lot of people in, the mainstream would just think of fiat is like, well, it seems to be sort of working, and we're not really thinking in these moral like principles. It's more like, let's just try stuff and see if it works, and we'll go from there. Like, that's kind of what happened in 2020. It's like, well, we're going to have to deal with this situation the way it is right now. We're not going to talk about morality when we're going to print 20% of the US dollar in 18 months or whatever the case is. We're just going to try to survive this very moment, and then we'll deal with the repercussions later. Well, there were repercussions, but they were never dealt with. And it was never, you were a total weirdo if you were talking about it in moral terms. If you're like the Thomas Masseys of the world, he's a total outlier. Most people just thought of it like, well, I mean, we made people stay at home. We should probably print some money and send them some checks to mollify them. And we should also give checks to every corporation as well, too, so that they don't fire their employees. And it's going to be a huge scam, maybe one of the largest scams in American history, but we'll never have to answer for it. So I think people just kind of think of it as like, there's no moral principles. Let's just sort of get by, and we'll do what we have to do to get through this current situation. And then there'll be another situation that we'll have to deal with when the time comes.
All right. So let's transition a little bit into, we talked about, you handling clients and, Bitcoin and, the faith and your IRA, but I would love for you to just kind of talk about that, like your journey there a little bit, the last decade or so, and how you became an IRA, why you became one, and I guess even maybe the challenges or what you see with the IRA and what you're doing, but also what do you see going forward? Because I think of whether it's financial advisors or if it's insurance brokers. I know a few that I've had some real knockdown, drag out debates with. And, of course, Bitcoiner guys like, oh, hey, the bond market might not exist eventually, like whole life insurance, all these things, right? Like, we go through these arguments. So I would love for you to kind of give your macro take just on your story, but also what the hangups you see, but also where things are going.
Sure. I have a registered investment advisor. So RIA is the acronym. And I'm just a solopreneur. So with the miracle of software, I work in an office by myself and basically leverage technology to serve a business of clients on my own. And I would say one of the trends that you see in the investment world is sort of like the barbell. And so I'm on like the small end of the barbell because of software, because of virtual work. You have now these like nimble, small investment firms that are on the end of the barbell that are, servicing a small number of clients. If you think about it, if you've got 100 clients with $1 million to invest and you charge them 1%, that's $1 million business. And there are still a lot of people that do that, and they're quite successful, and they'll probably stick around because the way that it works is like, if you have 100 clients, you've got basically 100 people that can hire and fire you. And most clients are fairly loyal. So like the 5 years of my firm, I've lost like a handful of clients. It's a very personal business. Most of my clients are, kind of clients for life, really. So it's a wonderful business in that regard. And if you think about it, if you can build up a book of 100 clients, 50 to 100 clients that you can have for the rest of your life, that can be a pretty good lifestyle. And so that's what I have. It's what, in the business we call it a lifestyle practice. I sort of work on my own terms. My wife just had our 4th child. I spent a couple weeks at home helping out with the family, working from home when necessary. And my business sort of afforded me the ability to do that. So that's one end of the barbell. Another thing that's happening in the investment space is you have people niching in various practice management areas. So you might have an advisor, like some friends of mine that are very adept at like student loans, for example, and they can give you good advice on how to handle your student loans. You might have advisors niching in an area of like corporate equity compensation. And so if you work at like Oracle Corporation or something like that, if you work at Amazon, if you work at a publicly traded company that's handing out a lot of equity compensation, you can hire an advisor that's going to be able to give you good advice on what to do with your stock options. On the other end of the barbell is the exact opposite. And so the way that the inertia on the other end is moving is it's consolidation, it's bigness, it's sort of the rich getting richer. And you can see this like in asset management, the asset managers that are into Bitcoin right now are the biggest firms. It's BlackRock. It's Fidelity. These are the firms that have the clout to be able to handle the regulatory environment because they can pay attorneys to help them navigate this. Whereas, a lot of firms in the middle are not going to pay the attorneys to be able to handle the crypto regulatory environment. Whereas BlackRock is like, we own the regulatory environment. We are the regulatory environment. So yeah, we'll be first movers in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Fidelity, same way. And so a lot of what happens in RA world is you're either trying to be super niche like Flattery over here, or you're trying to sell. You're like, I'm going to sell to a larger firm, or I'm going to try to acquire so I can achieve economies of scale by trying to move up and be larger and larger all the time. And that's the trend that's happening. If you're stuck in the middle, that's a tough place because you don't have the regulatory clout of like a BlackRock or a Fidelity. So maybe you're too nervous to get into Bitcoin because it's like, what if our firm gets shut down because we realize we're doing something wrong from a regulatory perspective? So a lot of the firms in the middle are worried about just sort of maintaining and they're getting sort of stuck in compliance and sort of stuck in the ways of how they've always done certain things. But I represent one end of the barbell, which is a pretty comfortable place to be for someone like myself that's trying to grow a firm on my own and in a way that's lucrative just for my family and not like a large enterprise. And that's kind of where I'm at, Brandon.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's self-awareness, and I know, as a young man, you're always like, I'm going to take over the world, and that's like generally most men or boys or young men are kind of feel that way. But as you get older, like you said, you kind of, like, hey, my family, like, I'm not trying to be Elon Musk and have 13 wives or whatever it is. Like, I don't need to go to Mars, because I want a life. I want an actual life to see my kids, see my family. So it's funny. Aladdin and I talk about that a lot with Bitcoin trading cards. That type of mentality where it's like, yeah, when we were younger, it's like, yeah, you're like, oh, I'm going to do it all, but it does change. So I love that you say that. Speaking on oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. I was just going to ask you, what are some of the models that you kind of like, as someone who's, dealing with math all the time and numbers, when it comes to Bitcoin, there's obviously a lot of models out there and different things. What are the things that you like? I just like looking at the log chart, like adoption, stuff like that, to show people the fundamentals. What are things that you kind of look at to show people when they're coming to get educated? Like, hey, check these out. Like, these are, you can't dispute these. Like, it is what it is. So what are the things you kind of look at when it comes to Bitcoin adoption, price?
Yeah. So one of the, one of the precepts of like financial advisor world is, what some people call quant finance. And so most financial advisors are super obsessed with like quantitative metrics. So like, hey, what is the price to book on the lowest? What is the lowest decile price to book of the the U.S. stock universe or something like that? And they're all, and it's it's a very sort of bean counter way of looking at it. Like, what's the lowest price to book decile? What are the cash flows that these businesses are taking off? So most quant finance people, their brains blow up when they try to think about Bitcoin because there are no cash flows. There is no way to value the book value of holding Bitcoin or something like that. So a lot of people have tried to do this through like, looking at mining metrics or something like that. And I'm more of a heretic as a bottom up investor in like the kind of Motley Fool vein, where, the way that Motley Fool looks at investing is not so much quantitative finance, but trying to think about looking forward. What are the essential businesses or essential technologies that we, with the snap of our fingers, if we didn't have them, we'd be missing out. And a lot of quant finance people don't like to look forward because they say like, oh, I don't have a crystal ball. Who am I to say, what the world should or would look like in the next 5 or 10 years? But I kind of like that sort of aspirational style investing. So I like thinking about Bitcoin as more of like a bottom up investment where we're thinking about, hey, this is a potential global money. This is a potential improvement on digital money, which we have digital money, but as we pointed out earlier, Brandon, it's flawed. It's fiat, Right. So I like to think about Bitcoin in that regard as more of like a bottom up idea. But yeah, I mean, some of the metrics I look at adoption. So just number of people that are adopting Bitcoin, number of people that are holding, more than 0.1 Bitcoin, the number of people that are running a node, the number of institutions that are getting involved in Bitcoin, that's still quite small. Like the Michael Saylors of the world are still the anomaly. And so, we've talked about the institutions are coming for years now, but I think that's a big one. If you think about it, like, even though we have the ETFs, you're still a weirdo. You're still like, there's a little bit of a, you got a little bit of a smell on you as like, you're a truther or something like that. If you're into Bitcoin, even though there's an ETF, it's not totally legitimate yet. And I kind of think, in the Motley Fool vein, I kind of think that's a good thing because that means we're still sort of early. There are trillions of dollars of capital that could be allocating to this thing that aren't. And it's not because they've looked at it and they've done the analysis and they've decided not to look at it, but they really aren't even looking at it at all. It's just, there's very smart people in the world of finance that are dismissive of Bitcoin because they haven't even looked at it. And so I still view it as a early buying opportunity in that regard. So I would say when more institutions get involved, that's something to pay attention to because that means that it's becoming more established, which we like, but that also means that as that happens more and more, there will be less and less opportunity as a sort of buy low opportunity, which is good if people are, if we're in on it. That means we front run the institutions, which, we've been doing now for a couple of years, but I think that trend is still in process. So yeah, the trend of the more Michael Saylors coming out, the Michael Dells coming out, wealthy families and institutions putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. That's something I pay most attention to. I still talk about Michael Saylor all the time, even though, he's been most people know his story by now. I still think it's quite relevant.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think of the Michael Saylor stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the Burr method in real estate, because that's the world I came from. So basically, raising money and then, fixing a property up. Just for people who don't know, raising money, taking other people's money, fixing a property up, buying it, fixing a property up, putting a tenant in there, and then refinancing a property and pulling all the money out. giving it back to all the lenders, and hopefully you're in it for nothing. You can acquire assets. I used to do that, not a ton, but we did that many times where we have an infinite return. Like we had nothing in the deal, and then we got a tenant in there paying us each month. And there's debt deals you could do, there's equity deals, but that's what Sailor's doing basically. So it's kind of, I laugh because like all of a sudden this got like really big in the last couple of months. Even people are like, "Whoa, look what he's doing! Infinite money glitch." It's like this has been around for a long time, guys. It's like it's really funny to see. It's cool to see like being done with Bitcoin and with a company. So I love that you talk about him a lot because it is very brilliant. It is a very smart, savvy move. Going back to the Kiyosaki versus Dave Ramsey, it's a very Kiyosaki-esque move. It's not so much a Dave Ramsey move, what he's doing. So I think that's really, really interesting. In saying all that, who's your biggest mentor? Is it Sailor in the space, or it could even be personal development, or in the last 10 years? Who is your mentor, the people you kind of keep coming back to over time? I know you talked about Sheets earlier, a little bit of Kiyosaki. Are those the guys for you, or the gals, or someone else out there that you kind of pay attention to?
Yeah. I would say, I'm trying to see if I have a book here. There's a book that I, have been pretty inspired by for years now. It's called 100 Baggers, and the author is named Chris Mayer. And what Chris Mayer did was a study on 100 baggers. So like stocks that return 100 to 1 over time. And what he did was took a look at the attributes of these stocks and tried to figure out like, hey, what are the attributes of these various investments what are the attributes in common of these various things? And that book was a real inspiration to me because it sort of, as someone that works with a lot of young families, which I do, it sort of inspired me to want to have 100 baggers for my clients. With the idea that, you could look at a portfolio and you could say, hey, I've been holding this for years now. And through my diamond hands, through my patience of buying and holding, I've been able to turn $1 into 100 many times over. And I think that's a really cool lesson. You could think about that in terms of like, if you want to have something to pass on to your kids can get the lesson of like, hey, dad has been investing this way for years. And now look at the lesson of dad. Why is he choosing these investments and then holding them? And there's a lot of corollaries to Bitcoin here. With regards to stock investing itself, some of the things that he pays attention to would be like skin in the game. So what you want to do is you want to invest alongside operators that have skin in the game. So largely like companies that are treated like private businesses tend to be all else being equal, fairly good stocks. So, like if it's a founder that has large amounts of skin in the game, if it's a founder that owns a lot of the stock himself, that could be a good sign because it means that you're investing alongside, you're doing sidecar investing. You're investing alongside a founder that is himself invested in that own business. And, in Bitcoin, that's a little different because sort of everybody has skin in the game.
Yeah.
There's not really one founder. Sort of everyone that holds Bitcoin has skin in the game themselves. And so we're all the hodlers of last resort. The next time there's a Bitcoin crash, which there will be, Brandon, you and I are responsible for, putting the bottom in by having our own diamond hands. And so everyone has skin in the game in that regard. But I think the idea of a sort of aspirational investing, of trying to find 100 baggers, that was something that Chris Mayer implanted in my brain that I have sort of transplanted into the Bitcoin world as well as the stock world. And that's a pretty cool thought. Like most people, at least like on financial Twitter or on Reddit or on YouTube, we're just trying to make a quick buck. It's like, hey, let me try to lever up and buy some GameStop futures. And then the next 2 weeks, I'm going to become a bajillionaire. That's sort of in the zeitgeist right now. And so I guess what I'm advocating for is pretty inspirational over the long run. but it's like, hey, if I can get 100 bagger in the next 10 to 20 years, although that's incredible, maybe that's not, that's still a little subtle in the world of fast finance that we live in today.
Yeah, it's it makes me think of multiple things. One of them being, you said we're here to put the bottom in, and I remember like being on Cafe Bitcoin like a year ago, and this came up. I don't know how it came up, but we were just talking about, someone was having a hard time or an objection they were getting or whatever it was, but it was, I remember just jump in there and be like, no one believes in fiat. Like, it was something about the belief of Bitcoin. It was like, no one believes in fiat. Like, the answer is right in front of your eyes. Like, if people just shut their ears and just kind of go around and watch what people are doing, what are people doing with fiat? They're selling it all the time in order to buy assets because they don't believe in fiat. No one who has even a slight understanding of finance and what's going on believes in fiat. They're not going to keep it long term. That's not the goal with it. It's a depreciating liability. It's not even an asset. And so that right there just shows you, but excuse me, you have people that are buying Bitcoin and holding it because that is the asset. That is the long-term capital. And so right there, like, you're always going to have that floor. So I think it's really fascinating you said that, because it just made me think of that conversation that I had a while back, and the importance of understanding that just little nuance right there, that people are constantly selling this liability of the dollar, fiat currencies, and they're holding, and they believe, like, no one believes in fiat, but people believe in Bitcoin. They understand and believe in the properties of Bitcoin. So it's really interesting. But going back to what you were saying though, too, with the, like, crypto, you're talking about young people coming in and talking to you. Do you get people coming in and asking about crypto or stuff like that? Because I saw a stat the other day that was, it was like 44% of, and hopefully I'm getting the numbers right, but it's very close. At least it was like 44% of people over 40 years old believe in stocks long term, and it's only like 14% of people under 40 believe in stocks long term. So I was wondering kind of what you're seeing, just people coming to you. Are they talking about crypto, the younger people? Like, what are the older crowd and younger crowd, when they come to you, how are they kind of seeing things?
Yeah. So my particular practice is not explicitly geared towards Bitcoiners. And so there are firms that are doing that. Like my friend Morgan Richard, she is explicitly giving advice to wealthy Bitcoiners that are already orange pilled and need advice on taxes and estate and legal matters. What I do is I'm more of getting people off zero. So really, people that come to me, as I mentioned earlier, they want to invest wisely. They want to invest sometimes in a moral way, and they want a good return. And so that is where Bitcoin fits in. And so we just get people off zero. We use the ETF. And we do financial planning engagements where we help people set up self-custody arrangements using mostly collaborative custody. And that's the beautiful thing about what I do is I get an orange pill people that are mostly on zero or they've sort of goofed around. And that's basically where I'm at. I think you're right, though. Yeah, I think younger people, it's Bitcoin is sort of like boomer coin in a lot of ways. It's like the idea that like Bitcoin is the thing is not super appreciated by younger folks. But I will say, speaking of boomer coin, a lot of folks in their 60s or 70s, they do sort of align with Bitcoin now. That's changed. So it's like, I think some people think of Bitcoin as like, they kind of understand that it's like an inflation hedge, or it is an answer to, I don't know, insane Biden inflation or the government's monetary insanity. Like there's a sense that like Bitcoin is sort of an answer to that. Maybe not that they're not going to get rich on Bitcoin, but that it's a safe haven. Even with people that are not super informed, I get a sense that they associate Bitcoin with that. Like the Fox News crowd or something like that.
Yeah.
They heard Tucker Carlson mention Bitcoin. And so that has changed over the last couple of years. I have noticed that boomer cons, for lack of a better word, are okay with Bitcoin. Like they're cool with it. And that's been a big change.
It's fascinating. So in saying that, I know we're getting towards the end here. What do you think there's a marketing problem with Bitcoin? So again, we're talking about these different generational divides and things of that nature. We see a lot of, I don't know if you call it negativity. You got a lot of sharp-tongued people in the Bitcoin space. You just, from time to time it flares up and you see, people that are, going crazy on other people and, just, have fun staying poor and this and that. And then, really getting crude at times and things of that nature. Do you think Bitcoin has a marketing problem? Like you said, the boomer coin, like all that stuff going on, because at the end of the day, money's psychological, or inflation itself is psychological. The economy is a psychological engine itself. So, I mean, do you think that Bitcoin could stand to shape up a little bit? I mean, again, it's, Bitcoin doesn't care at the end of the day, right? But what are your thoughts with all of that?
I don't know if I have a lot to add here, except to say from like a financial advisor's point of view, Bitcoin is like the blue chip. There's a cliche in investment world. It used to be, you can't get fired for owning IBM. That's what people used to say when I was a young stockbroker. The cliche was you'll never get fired for owning IBM. Of course, that's passé now. Nobody wants to own IBM anymore. Now it's like you can't get fired for owning SPY. The conventional advice is if you own the S&P 500 index, you can't go wrong. Well, I think Bitcoin is the blue chip. I think Bitcoin is the one reliable piece of quote unquote crypto that, I can sort of talk about publicly, and I more or less think it will probably work out, with all the caveats, like you need to buy and hold, you need to figure out how to protect your own keys, that sort of thing. But I don't know. I think the brand is pretty good. I think for not having a marketing department, by just being sort of an open source project where the brand is kind of created by the community. I mean, even like the word Bitcoin is cool. It's got Lindy effect. Like it's over 15 years, like the word still resonates. It's perfect. The word Bitcoin itself. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have much to offer beyond the fact that like from a buttoned up financial advisor point of view, like it does sort of seem like a blue chip, reliable brand to me. But in your asking the question, I can tell you have some thoughts. So what do you think?
I think it's part of just being in an echo chamber in Twitter or X or whatever, that's part of it at times. And I think it's a small part of it. However, at the same time, it's, can it turn people off? Yeah. But how many people is that, at the end of the day, or how many are there actually getting? So I actually push back in the sense of Bitcoin. I feel like it's almost a 4-letter word at times where I almost don't even talk about Bitcoin itself, or I don't even try not to mention the name. I'll just basically bring up, hey, these are the problems and we have a solution, or these are the problems and we need a fix to that. Half the time I won't even talk to Bitcoin, depending on what the audience is. So I won't, and I'm not doing what you do, but just in education, I'll just say, hey, these are all the problems and these are the solutions from what I see. And then I'll just kind of let people go on their way. I don't even mention Bitcoin sometimes because, like it has the properties that we care about, but I don't care what it's called actually. I literally could care less what the thing is called itself. So I think that's where, but again, that's just me being in an echo chamber probably. So my own cognitive dissonance that I probably try to deal with day to day. So I don't know, that's my like 2 sats on it, I guess.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think in understanding Bitcoin, you really need to start with the problem at hand. And so it's always important to just speak about the problem that Bitcoin fixes first and foremost. And, just in general, like it's always more cringe to be an optimist about something.
Right.
And it always sounds smarter to be a pessimist.
Yes.
Like if you're,
well said.
I mentioned the Motley Fool earlier. Everybody thinks that the Motley Fool guys are, not super erudite because they're like talking about like fun investments. It doesn't sound super serious. And, in crypto, that thing is taken to the max because it's like people are just total degenerate, none of it is real. And, obviously there's a limit to that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's always, if you want to capture people's attention, it always is probably a better approach to just start about the problem. You might want to be a little bit of a pessimist at first. But at the end of the day, I like Bitcoin. I think it's a pretty cool thing. And I don't know, you can only be a pessimist to a certain extent, because if you take the pessimism to its logical conclusion, you become a gold bug doomer. And nobody wants to be one of those people.
Yes. 100%. I've been there. That was me 10 years ago. I mean, that's a doomerism, right? And that's
I kind of like some of the gold bugs, but a lot of those people are in a very dark black pill place.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to, we are like hoping for like the end of the world, basically. And, end of the internet, end of the world, everything. Solar flares are, raining down, and it's a very weird world. But that's where, I think of it, where you have to, it's like naivete. Like people just think, oh, you're so naive. Like you're so optimistic, and like you said, there's a handful of percent of the world probably are entrepreneurs. And that's a lot of times, that's the people that are optimistic. They're idealistic even, right? Like I think we're maybe even too idealistic at times, where I know myself personally, I'm thinking too far into the future. And then I try to bring that into the now. And it's like, I know I need to be a little more pragmatic at times. I don't know, pessimistic necessarily, but more pragmatic of like, hey, where's world actually at? Instead of, but again, you have to build into the future, right? So
let me frame it in another way too. So there's two questions. One is, what is the truth of the matter? So like, if we truly are headed into Mad Max world, I mean, maybe we are. Okay. And if you have some unique insight into that, I want to hear what it is. I don't. And I'm not one that tries to pontificate on if we are going into Mad Max world or not. However, if you're like an old man, if you're like somebody in your 70s and you got kids, you got grandkids, you have a legacy to maintain, maybe you should be more of a doomer and a prepper, because that is the place in life where it's appropriate for you to prepare for the worst. If you're younger, and I think Brandon, you're an entrepreneurial guy, you probably should be a little bit more naive. The best, most successful entrepreneurs I've ever met, they're a little naive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you have to be a little bit irrational to have success in business. Actually, athletics too, Brandon. Someone like the best athletes, they have this irrational confidence where they just they think the shot's going to go in, and they just keep shooting even when they're missing. And so I think maybe part of it is just being young. When you're young, you should be a little bit naive. You should take more risks. And then as you get older, it's more appropriate that you act with more prudence and maybe become more of a doomer and a prepper. So that's more agnostic to the world that we're actually in, but just like in our place in life, you seem like a young guy, you need to take more risks. Whereas as you grow older, you rein in those risks a little bit.
Yep. Do you think in saying all that, do you think it's more important top down, like legal tender? Like obviously we're seeing this now. We've seen it in El Salvador. We're seeing it in some countries around the world. We're seeing it in America now, where you got Congress people introducing bills regarding Bitcoin and legal tenders / elimination of capital gains, like a bunch of different stuff when it comes to that. Do you think it's more important for governments, if we want to increase, I guess the goal being increase Bitcoin adoption, having it become something that humanity is using, obviously hyper Bitcoinization, that type of thing. Do you think it's more important for governments to be pushing it from the top down, or do you think it's more important to be educating the masses, bottom up, groundswell?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had this thought in my head for a while now, and it's convert the king. So in Frankish times or Merovingian times, whatever the dynasty was, during the Dark Ages in France, the Catholic missionaries were trying to convert the Franks. And there was this guy named Clovis, and he was the king of the Franks. And they were having no success converting these people until they converted the king, Clovis. And so there's this pivotal time in history called the baptism of Clovis, where this barbarian king was converted to the Catholic faith. And then after that, that was sort of the impetus to convert all of Christian Europe. This was like, I don't know, the 300s or 400s or something like that. I'm getting some of the details wrong, but you get the point. Baptism of Clovis, that's the main thing. So I kind of think that's the model here, like convert people of influence. We should be trying to orange pill people from a bottom up level that have influence. So when I mentioned Michael Saylor, what's significant about him is he's a billionaire. He runs, basically commands a publicly traded company. We should be trying to orange pill people that control businesses, people of influence in the Catholic Church, people of influence in government. I think one by one, orange pilling these people of influence is a way to sort of bottom up, get the desired result. I mean, you can see that. You can see in American politics, you have people like the Thomas Masseys that, read the Bitcoin Standard, and now they're talking about ending the Fed. That's a small thing, but you can see how that from a bottom up level is sort of permeating throughout the U.S. political system. These sort of small things are happening. So I think about it that way, like convert the king. Let's try to orange pill people of influence.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I love that. That's a first baptism of reference, baptism of Clovis reference on this show. That's for sure. So I like it though. I like that. That is, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if there's not a wrong way. I don't think, right. I think it's fascinating to see what people say, but you laid that out better than I heard it. So from anywhere. So I love that. In saying that, do you think, kind of the last, question or two before we'll try to play the lightning round game here. But do you think that society falls first through losing God or losing principles, losing natural law, losing truth? Do you think they fall that way first and then the money goes quickly after that? Or do people, start messing with the money and turn it into a currency and then they start losing those morals, losing God, losing, stuff like that? How have you kind of seen that throughout society?
You expect me to have an answer to that?
Well, your opinion. I just wanted how have
it's
you
both
seen it?
And right. Like I think, yeah, both are related. It does seem like our society has rejected God. Like it does seem like there is a decline of the West. Those of us that appreciate the West, Christendom, Western civilization, it does seem like the undeniable decline of that fundamentally is part and parcel with a rejection of God. But I do think all these things are related. As the West has declined, we've also been promoting fiat. And so what happened first? I don't know. I suppose I would have to say it has something to do with the rejection of God in society, but it also has coincided with fiat. I don't know. These two things have sort of exasperated each other.
Yeah.
I don't know, Brandon. That's a hard question. No, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the answer I've got when I don't ask this to everybody. I don't know, maybe half people or maybe only like a third of the people I ask this. And that's generally the answer that I get is that it's both. It's usually like they kind of go hand in hand. I thought, I don't know. What you were saying though, just made me think of, well, like, again, going back to the root cause, like we were saying earlier, of like the oil spill at the top of the river. At the end of the day, Bitcoin wouldn't matter, fiat wouldn't matter, like, money, gold, whatever, all these things wouldn't matter if people followed the 10 commandments, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that if you're coin clipping, if you're melting down the gold, you're trying to steal from people, break commandments, coming full circle now, well, that's a rejection of God in that sense, right? It's sin. You're now going against what God wants. So to me, I think that's the first answer. That's like the oil spill at the top of the river from the factory, and we need to go clean that up first. Because again, it wouldn't matter. Like none of these, money wouldn't matter. Nothing would matter really at the end of the day. If you just followed the 10 commandments, you wouldn't have all these problems. We wouldn't be arguing about all these different second, third, 10th order effects. So I don't know. It's a fascinating question, but it's, let's do little end game here presented by Bitcoin trading cards. So always doing the little end game here, the lightning round. We'll try to go through a little, 12 or 15 words and just give, the quick answer, a quick thought that kind of comes to mind when we go through these. Satoshi Nakamoto.
Quick answer.
Yeah. One word or a couple words, sentence, whatever comes to mind.
Okay. Satoshi Nakamoto was probably a man.
Oh man, I love it. Financial advisors.
Okay, financial advisors. That's a good question. Find a small independent financial advisor that's allowed to be a little weird.
I like it. Faith.
We live in a nihilist world where nothing matters. And the way to break out of the malaise is to realize that it's a matter of life and death, and that our souls are on the line, and our children's souls are on the line, and their children's souls are on the line, and so on and so on. It's the butterfly effect. The decisions that we make today with regards to life and death and about our souls are going to reverberate through the generations. So if you want your grandchildren and your great grandchildren and your children's children and so on and so forth to go to heaven, our actions today will reverberate throughout those generations.
Well, that's definitely the best answer we've had so far for faith. Money.
Money's a technology. So, a lot of our Catholic, conservative, traditional brethren, people in our orbit, Brandon, we're often skeptical of technology, right? But if you think about it, a book is a technology. My eyeglasses are a technology. Money's a technology. And so by us debasing the money, by us sort of actually uninventing money by, replacing with fiat, that's actually a downgrade. And we should desire better money for many reasons.
Love that. World Economic Forum.
You know what? I'm glad that people just know about this thing. So the fact that the internet has made World Economic Forum memes popularized, it's the same thing as like popularizing the word fiat. I mean, it used to be like a weird Ron Paul weirdo if you even knew about the WEF or the Federal Reserve. And so the fact that like we can laugh about these things and there's jokes that are now made about the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab is like the Bond villain that we can all laugh at. That is a step in the right direction. That is true progress.
It really is. It's funny. I always like joke with people. I'm like, man, if you would have told me 20 years ago as a kid that was very politically active and just an ardent defender of the Bill of Rights, Constitution, the founding fathers, that people would be knowing all across the world about this stuff and like making fun of it, like you just said, I never in a million years would have believed you. Never. You couldn't have paid me any amount of money to believe that. So huge win. Family
is true wealth. I know well-intentioned people that are actually very like good people in a lot of ways that make the choice not to have children. That's kind of that. I mean, I know people that are unable to have children for fertility reasons, which is a whole nother, side issue. Yeah. But there are also people that literally choose not to have children. And it's one of those things that like I could try to preach to young Andy the joy of having children and the purpose that it brings to your life. It would fall on deaf ears. You truly do not know until that baby is born what it means. It's a cliche, but it changes everything. And there's nothing I could say that could replace that feeling, what it does to a man. So you just got to do it. Have a kid and you'll understand what I'm talking about. And if you don't have kids, you don't understand it. And there's nothing I could say to convince you. What do you think?
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's it's a paradox of life. Like you just don't understand it until you get. It's kind of like Bitcoin. It seems absurd in a way when you don't get it, and it seems obvious once you do get it. You know, like once you have the kid, it seems obvious. You're like, wow, this is the point of life. Like, wow,
How many
I
kids
didn't
do you
know
have,
that.
Brandon?
You can't tell them. I have 4.
Oh man, that's awesome. Me too.
Yes,
You're my
yes.
competition.
Yeah, so cool. It's the best. I know. True Catholic. Spoken like a true Catholic. Integrity.
There's a word in Catholicism that I'm duplicitous. The idea of being duplicitous is, another way of saying it is like you live a double life. And there's it's like when you're in the weight room and there's the sign on the side of the weight room that says the real effort is what you do when no one's watching in the weight room.
Yes. Yep.
And that's so relevant now, just because like now everyone's watched. Like now everyone is for everything is for Instagram. Everything, nothing is real unless there's a picture taken. But the real integrity is what you do by yourself in the weight room, or the way you conduct your business when nobody knows or when nobody is looking. At the heart of things, how you go about your business. And of course, God knows. And so, at the end of our life, we'll have to account for that. So don't be duplicitous, live with integrity.
I love that. Talking politics and religion with family.
That's the only thing my brothers and I talk about. I'm from Iowa. And so, Iowa every 4 years has, for whatever reason, is still the center point of American politics because they have the caucuses. I remember a couple of 2015, 2016, my brother went to see Trump speak and he met Trump and he called me and he's like, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but he is so impressive and he's the best speaker I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah.
And I was like, Tim, what are you talking about? Like you're brainwashed right now. And so I don't know. Trump has just made politics more of a, if it was never entertainment, I mean, if it was entertainment before, well, I mean, now it's just entertainment to the max. I'm going to be watching the debates tonight and it's going to be pure entertainment.
Yes.
I'll probably be sort of aligning with Trump, but also just laughing at both sides. And I don't know. It's entertainment. You got to talk politics and religion.
You have to. It's the old Rush Limbaugh adage of, they tell you not to talk politics and religion with your family. What else is there to talk about? That's it. Right. It's just like, and that's definitely a male centered viewpoint for sure. I mean, that's war, politics, religion. I don't know. That's what men do.
If Shane Gillis has this line about if you have a dad who's a Fox News dad, that's a good dad.
No, I haven't heard that one.
You have a dad that's a Fox News dad, like watches Fox News every night, yells at the TV. Yep. That's a good dad. If your mom is a Fox News mom, that's kind of weird. And I think that's right. Yeah, like my wife could care less. She just has good sense and she doesn't really pay attention.
Yep. Oh man, that's a whole nother can of worms. We won't open it now, but boy, oh boy, yeah, we have to do a whole show on that. That's hilarious. Elon Musk.
Oh man, I don't know. I've been so back and forth on Elon.
Same.
He's such an enigma. I feel like I could argue both sides of Elon, and
same.
I would say I sort of admire him, but I don't know.
You're the only person. Again, like that's you pinpoint the exact feeling I have with him. Like I can make the argument both ways, up and down. I don't know. I just, like you said, he's an enigma. I admire him, but I don't. I don't know. He's like. That's why I always ask everyone Elon Musk, because he's such like kind of like Trump. I mean, he's such a lightning rod either way. Wild. All right, a couple more. BlackRock.
You don't have to buy BlackRock. Yeah. Don't invest in iShares. We talked about Catholic investing earlier. You don't have to own iShares. Just don't buy BlackRock funds. So BlackRock has been called the fourth branch of U.S. government by certain commentators that have recognized how much influence the Larry Finks of the world have with, this dates back for years now, but especially with the Biden administration, they are very much connected with BlackRock. And so, it's crony capitalism to its finest. You don't have to defend the current system that we're in and be called a communist, because we don't have a capitalistic system right now. We have crony capitalism. And a big reason for that is BlackRock. It's kind of like the fourth branch of U.S. government.
Yeah. This is wild. I already I had Donald Trump on this list, but we already kind of talked about him. So I'm actually going to change this one to Candace Owens.
I don't know much about her. Yeah, I don't. As a matter of principle, I was not planning on saying this, but I don't tend to follow a lot of women on Twitter. So just because I don't like, a lot of them are just like, a pretty face that is repeating what a conservative commentator or a Bitcoiner or somebody is already saying in a better way. And so I don't know much about her. I've heard that some people like her. I've heard she's had a bit of I don't know, a come to Jesus or something like that. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't know much about her.
Yeah. She apparently, again, I can't verify necessarily, but she trust but verify, I guess. She converted to Catholicism recently. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And he was a convert as well, I believe, a while back, I think. But yeah, she's been going down I guess, I don't know if I don't want to say the term on here necessarily, but she's been going down the rabbit hole, following the white rabbit, as if you will. But it's really fascinating going from the Republican, very traditional like fiat politics to all of a sudden now we're going down the rabbit holes. So fascinating, really fascinating. So I do feel like that there's a something to do with the Twitter. I love that you kind of said that, because I've been having that sense for a while that a lot of the accounts on Twitter, like the women Twitter accounts, they're maybe men that are like saying men things, or like things that they think men will get after, men will like, and they have some nice pictures on there. And I feel like there's a lot of accounts like that. So it's hard to know, what's what. It's a really, really fascinating time, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. Last ones at the end here anyway. Bitcoin trading cards.
I need to buy my first pack for myself and for my kids.
Yes.
I grew up collecting baseball cards, and it's a practice I would like to get back into. And I think the way to do that is to buy my first pack of Bitcoin trading cards. So I need to do that, Brian.
Let's go. We can hook it up. I love it. And then simple wealth planning.
Yeah. Your finances don't have to be fancy. You don't have to hire some fancy financial planner. You don't actually have to even buy index funds that nobody understands anyway. You can buy Bitcoin. You can even invest in your own business. And that's what simple wealth planning is.
Love it. What you passed the test. What are you going to Nashville? Are you going to any conferences the rest of the year?
I'm not. I'm sort of involved in my Kansas City Bitcoiner community. We do some things around here. There's like a sort of a group of Catholic Bitcoiners I interact with here and there. But unfortunately, I'm not going to Nashville. Maybe next year, or maybe Brandon, when you and I throw a conference.
Love it. Love it. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you coming on so much. Where can people find you?
Andy Flattery on Twitter, Flattery, and my website is simplewealthkc.com.
Thank you, Mr. Andy Flattery, for being a playable character. We need many more of them. So thank you for being one of them, sir. Appreciate you.
It was a real pleasure, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows, of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world one collectible physical trading card at a time by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.